Welcome to a Boxscore Geeks show. We've got more playoff action going on tonight, and as with previous weeks, we've got news in front of us to start. I'm Dre Alvarez, aka Nerd Numbers, and with me is Arturo Galletti,
Hey,
the playoff prognosticator, the draft master. Frankly, there is not a more perfect person to talk about any of these subjects. The only way it could be better is if Boston was still alive.
oh come
Um,
on! It's like I get biased when Boston's still alive. So, and I
that is
recognize my bias. So,
That is true. Now, that said, as with previous weeks, it appears when the playoffs are on and people not in the playoffs are around, they want to get their name mentioned. So that's why we see all this news coming out. That's why you see coach firings, hirings, etc. So the topic I actually wanted to talk about first was Kevin Love. I don't want to say too much about it, but basically he said he's not resigning his contract. He wants to be traded. He listed a few teams, including Golden State, which should have Golden State fans salivating. And then also a great link that Brian sent along about this. Oh, by the way, I realized I don't introduce Brian in the intros. I apologize for that, Brian. And sometimes I forget you in the show write-ups. But our fantastic producer, Brian, who's doing all this fancy hand waving if you're watching the video, basically gave a great article that said, Ricky Rubio about how Love's not really, Kevin doesn't feel wanted, appreciated, certainly doesn't have the team around him, says he's forcing his way out. I've got a few things to say on this, Arturo, but I'll let you say whatever you want to say about Kevin Love.
well, I mean, I inaugurated the bandwagon for Kevin Love. I wrote a piece about I think it's like when he was a rookie, where I wrote like that basically like his rookie season was like unlike anything that we'd ever seen. He is by far one of the top five players in the league. It's just he's playing in a really, really bad market on a really, really bad team. And I can't blame him. I mean, if I were Kevin Love, I would definitely want to go to a more smartly run team. I mean, if you look at the guys, the stellar group of guys that have like run this team or been the GMs and been the managers. I mean, like God. I mean, like who wouldn't want to lead this team? And I mean, I think as I said, I mean, I got there and I got so much crap when I put that out there that like I thought he was one of the best players in the league.
And a year
And
later, you definitely were proven
it,
right.
a year later, people were like, "Oh wow, he's having all these like 30, 20 games." I'm like, "Yeah, he's been that good for a while." It's just it just so happens he was playing on a crappy team, and
Really?
that
So, by the way, testing again Brian's ability to look things up quickly. You said the odds, basically the odds of having a player that good on a team, mixed with the odds of having a supporting cast that bad, were virtually impossible in the NBA because like
never happened. Yeah, never.
making a supporting staff that bad on a team just does not happen.
If you'd put him on any other team, it would have been like more like this year's T Wolves team. It's just that team was like it was a hole of suck. I mean, it was just like bad. They had no clue about. My wife is laughing at my last comment, so I mean that's probably good. So it was. I mean, it's just a really bad collection of players. And again, I think he's had some bad luck. I think they had a decent team last year, but it just got banged up. I think this year it was a really good team for whatever reason. I think there were some distractions going on, couldn't close out. I think if I kept saying if Minnesota had been in the East, I think we're talking about Minnesota in the Eastern Conference Finals right now because they're a really good team with some really good players, and also people Pekovic got banged up. They didn't really figure out what they had in Deng until later on in the season. There's some decent parts on that team right now. I do think if I were him, I mean definitely you'd much rather be in Golden State or Houston or I was throwing this out there last night as a crazy idea, but he might even wind up in Cleveland because at least for a year because and the people were saying well Cleveland's not crazy enough to trade the number one pick for like half of your weight. It's Cleveland.
So
Yes,
by the
yes,
way,
they would.
I actually want to use this to segue into the draft, but I want to give a closing thought on Love. I'd love to give Love more time, but we'll get more time for Love. This story will stick around. But as Patrick kind of pointed out, a lot of this seems ridiculous. I wrote an article a while back why the NBA only has themselves to blame for players' poor attitudes. Wow, terrible title. Now looking back on it, but basically, the owners have all the power. Kevin Love can say whatever he wants, and frankly all Minnesota has to do is look at him and say, if you do this, you will leave at least a year of contract time on the bench. You will leave 4% raises yearly on the bench. They can just make him blink. And the question is if he hates them that bad, and he might, but they have all the power. So this is him being rational. This is the only way he's going to get himself to a team he wants for the money he wants. But the reality is the Wolves still have all the power here.
Yeah, I've always thrown this out there. Imagine being really, really good at your job, but you're forced to work in a city that you don't like, in an unsafe factory, and your family is 3,000 miles away, and it's cold. Uh, it put yourself in that rational position, and you have some leverage, to force yourself to get traded to a place where, like, hey, your family lives, you make more money, there's sunshine, there's a beach, and you can actually, like, have a good time while working. So what's irrational about that? It's actually perfectly rational. I mean, if you're a player on a team that's that bad, then you want to be able to go to a team that's better. I mean, it's just natural to want to work in a place where you enjoy yourself.
Oh, absolutely. All right. So on the draft, which is why he ended up here in the first place, the Cavaliers, and I believe you tweeted out about this, basically should get out of the NBA game and start going to Vegas instead. I think you said the odds were what, 1 in 8,000 this happens?
Yeah, I worked it out a couple times. I refined it a little bit. It moved around, but it ended up like the specific. So think about this as like, they played. They had in 4 drafts. They had they had 4 lottery balls, right? So it's like 5 lottery balls. So they had 2 in the 2011 draft. They had 1 they got from the Clippers. They had 1 in 2012, 1 in 2013, 1 in 2014, and their odds based on the number of lottery balls that they had of getting as much value as they got for their lottery balls or better was 1 in 8,000. And man, that means like 1 in 8,000 like drafts. Like you'll see this kind of it's really kind of insane how much draft value they actually got.
There have been a little over 20. So we've seen something very, very rare indeed.
This is, I mean, like, think about it. They didn't even have the best odds in any of these years. They got the #1 pick 3 times. 3 times, and like their other one was like a #4. It's like they had the 2 other ones that were #1s were #4, so those were really good too. And I was saying that this is some sort of this is either, I mean, this is 2 things. This is God trolling Cleveland. That's one. I think the other thing is this is like the ultimate the ultimate practical experiment in why tanking doesn't work. Right? If you think tanking works, I mean, look at the Cavaliers. They've gotten everything you could ever possibly want, and they can't do it. If you're a bad organization and you don't know what to do with, like, money, then why should we give you more money? Imagine a business that just keeps bleeding and hemorrhaging money. Why would a bank keep giving it money? It's like
I got a little bit of loving.
Here's the thing: if you gave San Antonio this same amount of like draft capital, they would build a team that like would make the playoffs for 40 straight years, probably. I mean, because this is just a huge market advantage. There's a couple pieces out. I put a piece out before, and I know 538 put a piece that touched on the same ground. It's like a #1 pick is worth like $30 million to a franchise. So basically, the Cleveland Cavaliers, if you take the numbers out, got like 90, like 100 and about $110 million of value from 5 lottery balls.
So by the way, if you look at us, right, we live casted the draft last year. You're talking about insanity. I made a tweet that was a little funny about that. I said, insanity is giving the Cleveland Cavaliers the #1 pick over and over again and expecting different results. We live casted the draft last year. If you want to see Arturo and me just get utterly stumped, it's when the Cavaliers select Bennett with the #1 pick.
Well, but see, this is where people kind of, there's a couple things that people do, which is it's mine, right? So I overvalue what's mine. Like, so I have no clear or unbiased perception of what's mine. So the Cleveland Cavaliers have no clear or no like unbiased appreciation of the roster. The roster's not good. So not picking the best guy on the board because I think the guy who I have on my bench, right, who couldn't even get off the bench on his college team is better than the guy I'm drafting. It's like you can't like just like fall in love with your guys. You have to take the best player you can get or the best value. And so we were talking about this today on Twitter. It's like somebody was asking, it's like, oh, why they were talking about John Wall and why we wouldn't pay John Wall the max. And I said, look, here's the thing. John Wall is the kind of player that John Wall is not the kind of player that wins a title. He's like, by our numbers, he's a decent point guard. He's like in the top 15, right? That's not worth.
That qualifies him as a starting point guard in the NBA.
Right, he's a starting point guard, but he's not a superstar or a franchise big, which are the 2 things you want to get out. If you've had 3 #1 draft picks, in 4 years, and you've not gotten one franchise big, then what the hell are you like? What the hell are you doing? It's like teams like go to the wall to like get these number one picks and like get franchise picks. Like, let me ask you a question. San Antonio's had two number one picks, right?
Yep.
So what did they draft?
They drafted the best big man.
Twice, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be fair, a lot of that was luck, right, and being in the right draft, which I
Yeah,
wrote
but they
about
had they
today.
had they had David Robinson when they drafted Tim Duncan, and they could have said, we can't
Well,
take Tim Duncan
yeah,
because we've got
they
David
could have done
Robinson.
they could have done the Portland motto. We
They
don't
could
need
have
Michael
taken.
Jordan. We've
Yeah,
already
we could
got
have.
Clyde.
That's another great example. Oh, we can't take Michael. We can't make it work with Michael and Clyde. Let's take somebody else. Let's take Sam Bowie. And it's like they San Antonio could have passed. San Antonio could have taken Chauncey Billups, right? And said like, oh no, we're not going to make it work with Tim and Tim and David. But no, they took the best guy on the board. They took the guy that's like Mr. Reliable, the guy that's gotten them to like 17 straight playoffs. And again, this team's like talk themselves out of what they should do because they're trying to be smarter than the room. I mean, it's I always go like, what would Bill Belichick do? Bill Belichick would take the best player on the board, and if he couldn't get the best player on the board, he'd trade out and get something else, right?
Okay, let's actually move on in
Nice
just a
segue,
bit.
right?
Yeah, but I was going to say, let's pretend hypothetically
Okay.
you're in the Cavaliers draft room this year. Ben Alamar's been ousted. I suspect Ben Alamar's not getting listened to in that organization anyway, which is a real shame. He seems like a real smart guy. Okay, you're in the Cleveland Cavaliers draft room. You were allowed to just take over. First off, like that, no one you get to punch in the draft. Who do you pick this year if you're Cleveland?
Well, see, I think we were talking about this beforehand, and you were saying that like basically I would get paid incentives based on how many wins my draft pick generated,
Yeah.
right?
Oh yeah. So sorry. To make this clear, this case I'm just giving it to you full hog. Like you can do whatever you want, and then I'll follow up about my other hypothetical situation after that.
Do I have to give you actual players that I want?
Do you want to, or do you want to just give
No,
vague?
no.
I'll leave it up to you.
Let's not sell yet. I mean, we've got some. I've got some of that stuff in the pipeline. I want to give it away. But here's the thing. First thing I want to do is I want to look at my roster objectively. So, what kind of roster do I have, and what do I need? Like, do I have
Everything? Your cupboard is bare.
Let me go through. I'm looking through. So, is there anything on the Cleveland team that I would keep if I were building a kind of I was looking to build a championship team? And my answer is going to be, maybe I forget their name. What's the name of their small forward? I forget his name. Crap, I forget his.
I'm pulling open
Tristan Thompson.
right?
So maybe I keep Tristan Thompson, and maybe I think Tristan and Anderson, and even Anderson. The problem is like Anderson I want to trade because Anderson's like too injury prone, so he never plays a full season. So there isn't, and Kyrie man, like Kyrie's overvalued. So I would actually see if I can get out of this contract before, like I might even think about pulling a Sixers and just kind of clearing everything out, because I don't think there's any piece on that Cleveland team right now that's a piece that's going to be in a championship team. That's my maybe Tristan Thompson's the only one I would think about, but given that, then basically carte blanche. We want to get the best player on the board, right? And if we can, we might want to see if we can move to get additional either draft picks this year or next year. Again, somewhat pull a Philly. There is nothing on this roster that leads me to think that it can win a title right now. And forget, LeBron's not walking through that door. So, I think I threw it out there that you maybe want to, that they were thinking about maybe like putting in a move for Kevin Love, but I wouldn't do that because you wouldn't want him to stay. So again, I would just try to see if I can get who is the best player, the safest bet on the board. Two things. We're going to do background checks on everybody. We're going to do independent medical checks on everybody. So if Joel Embiid has back problems and we don't know if he's going to recover, then we don't draft Joel Embiid, right? So if we think Andrew Wiggins is dominant and he's got like, great, it's kind of like the what's the name of that the QE test the test they put on the football players? I forget this one.
Not the Wonderlic, but the Wonderlic doesn't correlate with success.
But no, that's fine. I'm saying like do like characters. So like find out if these guys are good guys and what their backgrounds are. And you want a guy who's stable, who doesn't have the kind of troubles Michael Beasley had, who doesn't have the medical history, and who's the best bet. And again, when in doubt, draft the big man. Right.
I'll agree. I like a lot of the sound of that, and I definitely go with the big man. I want one last point on that. But I will say, just to our listeners, I don't necessarily agree with Arturo as much on the background and character study test. There have been lots of, Dennis Rodman's one of the best of all time. This is a guy that showed up late to a game because he was at a wrestling event.
Well, yeah,
Um,
but see, but the thing about Rodman wasn't crazy when they drafted him, and again, it's the crazy again. The later you go, again, if you're picking number one, you don't want to pick crazy. If you're picking number 14, then ooh, wow, that's great. Let's pick crazy. Like if I'm picking lower in the draft, so I've got a high draft pick at the one, but say I've got to pick at the 12, 14 slot, then I'm looking for guys that got passed on for stupid reasons. It's like you're looking for like what the Spurs did with God, I'm blanking on names today. What's his name? He's playing for the Mavs now. Oh God,
you're what? Okay, I'll look up the Mavs, but
Spurs player playing for the Mavs. He was the center, the guy with the knee, the problems with knee problems, no knee ligaments,
the guy with the knee. All right, yeah, this is
no
this.
no knee ligaments. He was picked like I think he was the first pick in the second round for the Spurs.
Okay, so Brandon Wright,
He
Bernard
was
James.
he was great in the playoff series. This is like compelling podcasting. He was great in the series between this is like 50 questions. Dude, he was the center for Dallas this year in the playoffs. Dewan
Uh,
Blair. Dewan Blair.
okay,
So Dewan Blair is a guy who the Spurs picked up on, who was like the most productive player in college, but he got passed on because he has no knee ligaments, right? But he was still even with no knee ligaments, he was great and he was passed on for a stupid reason. So the further down you go, the less risk averse you are. So up top, at the top of the draft, you're looking for like sure things. As you get down lower, you're looking for those,
interesting question on this. Is this actually kind of an advantage to the Spurs? Because this lets them build a good team and actually take risks. Because you've got Ted Leonsis, who both you and Dave said don't take John Wall, and he looked at you and went, "Are you crazy?" And took John Wall. Well, when you're the Spurs, no one cares who the Spurs take at the 28th pick.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there's some interesting picks in this draft because there's all these college guys, but there's a couple guys in there. One that are devalued for silly reasons. I think two. The other one that's interesting is you've got some European players. There's one European player in particular that I really love in this draft, and I really don't even want to say his name because I'm hoping the Celtics get him. Who, if you start doing some research on the numbers, this kid actually had he had the best numbers in the EuroLeague.
Have you been mailing Mike Zarin about this, or?
I may email Mike Zarin about this, and for those, he's the assistant GM for the Celtics, and he's really really good. He's a big man, and he had as a 19, 20-year-old, he had the best numbers in the EuroLeague tournament, which is the equivalent of the NBA playoffs. So there's some guys in this draft that I wouldn't be surprised if you see some teams like the Spurs make a trade to move on to like the 14, 15 slot because there's some guys in this draft that are going to be surprising. Whereas, and you wrote a great piece on this, which like sometimes some drafts are crap. Well, but this draft really isn't crap at all. I mean, this is a draft.
I'm actually something, and I mean, you've done this before. This might actually just be a simple chart worth us doing, and I mean, I think you can do it with your numbers. Is just plotting what your strength of the draft, like your top, like Arturo's top 10, right? Top 10 players in each draft. Plotting the strength of each draft and showing where this one. That's a really simple graph and might be fun. I know we're supposed to wait till the end to tease pieces, Brian. One last just interesting bit of trivia. This may very well, yeah. Whoa!
By the way, by the way, just I got distracted because my wife is like pointing to the fact that the Spurs are beating the Thunder by 29 points at the end of three.
Oh, you're killing me because I want to end with dessert, so we're gonna save them.
We'll get that, but I'm
saying we'll see what kind of a lead.
The Spurs are in machine. They're in basketball destruction mode right now.
Yes, in honor of Godzilla coming out. But okay, last note. This may very well be the only time in NBA. This has to be where 3 number 1 picks on their rookie contracts play together on a team, which is this just does not happen. It's absurd.
It's completely insane, and if you really look at it, and again, here's the thing: I loved Kyrie Irving when he came out, but the problem is like, and the more I do analysis on this, I would never, ever, 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 ever pick a point guard as number 1 ever, unless he's 6'7". That's the only time I'm picking. Unless he's 6'7", built like Magic Johnson. I'm not picking a point guard as my number 1 pick ever. You never do that. That's a bad idea. Because here's the thing, it's like think about the point guards who are on the championship teams, like the teams that are on now. Is there any one of them that's a lottery pick? Well, okay, Westbrook is a lottery pick, and Westbrook is an argument waiting to happen, and he's not really a point guard.
So what was the year that Chris Paul came out, by the way?
Chris Paul went number 6. No, number 5.
He went
The
number
Hawks passed
4,
him.
and you got
The Hawks
him.
passed him.
Ironically, you actually were behind them for Marvin Williams, but even then, you didn't think Chris Paul was your guaranteed number 1. Sorry, I got a little distracted there. I completely agree with you, by the way. That was kind of the last point. We got into an argument. We need to write more about this, which is just kind of your point, which is point guards just aren't as fundamental to success as people seem to think.
Well, the problem is like with and they used to be. The problem is like with the rule change. Now it's a lot more. There's a lot more advantage. There's a lot more good point guards out there because the rules kind of favor them. So I mean, as long as it's rarer to get an effective big man who can pass and shoot, right? So those are a lot more valuable than that. It's like I'm making the argument. Somebody was making the argument for Wall. And we've been talking about this all day, and I'm like, well, I was thinking about it. It's like, so if you're Washington and Toronto calls you up and says, I want to trade Kyle Lowry and Jonas Valanciunas for John Wall, what do you say?
Well, I say yes so fast.
Yeah, I mean, and Lowry's good, man, and whatever else you think about like Wall, man, Lowry's kind of shown it, and he's actually been better than Wall, and I get the fact that he's got these physical skills and he's not a bad player, but again, he's not a max guy, and it's really hard. The only max guy among the point guards in the league is Chris Paul. He's the only one who's kind of deserves the max contract.
Oh, I agree 100%. Now, well, I have absolutely no segue. Well, actually, okay, slight one. Talking about teams that don't really need a marquee point guard and value passing skills in big men, we wanted to talk the playoffs a little. It's gotten much easier. You'll notice we spent half the podcast talking about the draft and Kevin Love first because the playoffs are so much shorter and possibly much less interesting. Indiana, Miami. I've got 2 questions for you, Arturo.
Yes.
I'll ask the first and I'll ask the second. So don't let me. I've noticed this. I've listened to old podcasts. I forget multi-part questions. I'll say I've got 3 points. I'll say the first point and then we move on. I never mentioned. So don't let me forget the second point.
You still have 3 points. You just only mentioned 2. Keep going.
Yeah, fair enough. Point number 1. What the heck happened in game 1?
Well, what the heck happened in game 1? People ask me at work now. It's hilarious to me that people would like stop me in my factory and like ask me about this stuff. And so they basically my answer was like, 1, Miami missed all these 3-point shots. It was a bit of a silly game, and it happens. And it's our model liked Miami in 6. So if you think about what does a Miami in 6 win look like? Well, it means that you play 3 games in Miami and 3 games in Indiana. Miami wins 3 games at home and wins 1 game in Indiana. Now, that kind of match what happened in game 1. I mean, Miami. This is the worst Miami team of the LeBron era, and it's clearly the worst Miami team of the LeBron era because the 2011 team would kill this team, and I think the 2012 and 2013 would kill it too. So they're older, they're not as effective. Like Wade looks like he's dead, and he just like I've seen plays where I'm like he doesn't even try to dunk the ball. He's just kind of like doing these layups where like you just know he just can't jump that high. And in that first game, I mean, like Bosch missed a bunch of open threes, and sometimes when you miss open threes, you're gonna lose. And it just they couldn't get back on that team. There was that ridiculous like Mario Chalmers play where like somehow he like got 4 free throws to make 3 shots, and like everyone was like, well, that's a new rule. We didn't know that existed. Well, it was apparently the first time it's ever been called. He got 4 shots to make 3 fouls on like this weird play. So it was a strange game. I think game 2 was more up to speed where like they were sticking around. LeBron just said, "Screw it, I'm winning this game," and he like scored something. He basically took over for like a 4-minute stretch there, and they were better and they beat him at home. Again, Indiana's lost half their games. They won. I believe they played 8 games at home and they've lost 4. And if that pattern holds, Miami will beat them twice in Miami, and maybe this thing might go 5. I keep thinking these series might be shorter than we thought. I mean, I gave some respect to Indiana, thinking they might get back to it, but I haven't seen much evidence that is the case.
So on that note, I'm curious about them even getting back to it, and based on his play in game 2. Paul George was concussed, and I'm curious what impact you think that has, especially after his game 2 was atrocious.
Well, he's been their best player in the playoffs, and he's a good player. He's a good defender. I mean, he's kept LeBron somewhat like honest. I think same thing with Wade. It's helpful. Not having him in there, like Indiana has a really bad offense, and not having Paul George in there makes them really worse. I mean, it's the domino effect. You take Paul George out, and then you can do a lot of other things. You can basically like leave, cover everybody and say, look, hey, Lance, you can do whatever you want to try to beat us. And this is not necessarily, this is a really bad thing because Lance kind of thinks he can do it and he starts doing dumb things and it starts just looking bad. So I think like they need Paul George to have any shot of stretching this out. I don't think they can win the series, but I think they need Paul George if they want to make it like the 6 games. I think without Paul George, the thing goes 5.
I was going to say, didn't Lance Stevenson? He played fairly well, but I think he just had a bad fourth quarter.
Yeah, but this is the J.R. Smith kind of playing well, where like he's playing well, but it's because bad shots and bad decisions are like getting paid off, and really in the long term, this is a bad thing. It's like if what is it? If you're splitting on a 6. And you're hitting 21 on both sides, and that's not necessarily something that's teaching you to do smart things in the future. And I think I may have gotten that completely wrong, but it sounded right in my head. But the point is like he's doing dumb things and getting paid off for them, and I don't think that's where you want to go long term.
Well, yeah, I think we all agree 100% with that. I mean, to be fair though, Lance Stevenson is a good player by our metrics, and it'll be interesting to see what Indiana does in the offseason. But I would be skeptical. Any game I see Lance taking the most shots on the team, I'm going to be worried. Very much like this is. Oh, go ahead.
He's one of those guys, and I mean, I argue that Westbrook is the same kind of guy, which is like in a specific system and a specific role, he's going to be more valuable. The more freedom and the more open and the more you let him make dumb choices, the worse off he's going to be. And I think that's key. There are certain guys that you can't like Chris Paul. You can give him the ball and say, "Hey, Chris, go ahead and do whatever hell you want." I think LeBron's the same way. There are certain guys you cannot do this to. That's just not the way to go.
Huh. I think it just started raining in my neck of the woods, so sorry if I look perplexed. Okay, so on the note of the wonderful Russell Westbrook in bad systems, I am delighted. I'm not going to lie. I was telling Brian this in the pre-show. I want Kevin Durant to win a title. I really do. I just can't have him do it with Russell Westbrook, especially we were talking economics. I have so much sunk cost in Russell Westbrook hate that anytime he does something good, it comes back to me. And there is a non-trivial chance Russell Westbrook could be the finals MVP in the right circumstance. And I just can't deal with that. So I am gleefully delighted to look at the San Antonio Spurs Thunder score and see Russell Westbrook with 15 points on 24 shots in a fourth quarter rout at the Spurs.
I have a 3-word answer for your Russell Westbrook hate. 6 for 24.
7 for 24. He managed to make one.
Yeah, okay, you're right. 7 for 24. Goddamn, Kobe winning the Finals MVP. But okay, yeah, okay. So I think here's the thing. I'm at the point where like my wife was asking. We were watching the game. She always asked me who we were rooting for, and I said, well, San Antonio represents everything good about basketball, and Oklahoma represents everything bad about basketball. We're not rooting for evil in this house. We don't root for the Yankees. We don't root for the Lakers, and we definitely don't root for the Thunder. I don't like teams that get all the calls, and like I don't like teams that are poorly coached, and I don't like teams that do dumb things. So Oklahoma. I mean, here's the thing. I think Kevin Durant's a great player. This configuration of team is just guaranteed to just making me roll. They just play dumb ball, and they're very, very talented. I keep saying, like, I think Russell Westbrook is fantastically talented. He's just in the wrong system in the wrong role, and I think if this team actually gets a real coach, they're going to be a joy to watch because they're so talented. But as they're currently configured, oh God, makes me want to like I can't watch them. They're like a billionaires version of that Washington Wizards team. Really, we're like they're like talented team that does dumb things. It's just like they're so
by the way, just random question: if you get to take over, I keep making this magical Arturo that gets to do magical things, change the draft. Scotty Brooks, actually, do you remember there used to be this really terrible Disney show about this kid that had an old football jersey and he'd put it on, and when he put it on, he took the place of a professional athlete and would always make a big play for the pro athlete. It was a big deal.
I vaguely remember something like that. I think that may have been like past my era. I think I might have been in college when that came. I remember I'm a little older.
I always mess up the team you root for, but what's the jersey you have that you've worn on the podcast in past? The soccer jersey?
I wear an Arsenal jersey, and Arsenal basically just won their first cup in 9 years this Sunday. Like Arsenal won the first goal that I think a Kroenke team has won in something like it might be ever. They won the FA Cup in a thrilling final where they were down 2-0 after 12 minutes, and then I got on my treadmill for the next hour and a half. It was torture. They went into overtime. They managed to tie the game and then win it in extra time. It was a fantastic game. And there was a great shot. Fox shows the cup as they're like 3 minutes left in the game. Fox is showing the cup. The guy is like, this is overtime. He's writing Arsenal on the cup. And obviously, as Fox does this, obviously Fox, right? They cut away. Our goalie falls down going for a ball. And so basically, Hull City was the opponent, had an open net shot that they missed. Like, wow. And everybody stayed like, we saw the cup, and I was like, oh crap, they just showed the cup. They're writing the name. No. And they almost and nobody wants it to go to penalty. But it was a fantastic game. But we kind of digressed from something else. You were asking.
Okay, so
you were going to ask me what I was
put on your magical Arsenal jersey, and suddenly you're on the bench instead of in Scott Brooks' head. So that's how this weird show worked. I'm gonna have to link this, Brian. This is weird. Okay, which lineup do you roll out against the Spurs for optimal chances of winning?
And I have to try against the Spurs. I mean, I think the problem is like I don't really, I tried to. Can I apply magical powers and heal Serge Ibaka, or is that not an option?
Let's do both. Let's do two. Let's pretend you go back in time and you're playing against the Clippers and the refs aren't stormtroopers, so you actually have to put in a good lineup to win. Who would you have played against the Clippers, and then now, with Ibaka down, who would you put in against the Spurs?
Well, I mean, I think I would totally for that team. I would go with I would have a Reggie kind of. I would try to make sure that I have Durant or Westbrook on at all times, but I would do the dueling banjos thing where I don't have them on necessarily at the same time. I would think about using Reggie as my primary point guard and playing Wes off the ball, which it really worked a lot of times. Like Westbrook off the ball worked really well in some of those, particularly in the Grizzlies series. I would also kind of do a lot of the non-Westbrook lineups, and then have Westbrook. I'm still going to play Westbrook let's say I play Westbrook 35 minutes, but the other 13 that he's not playing, I'm running out those Durant lineups that were so effective in the season. They're really, really effective. I'm thinking about Ibaka at the 5, although I might think about that depending on how much foul trouble I can get DeAndre in, and I think a lot about Collison and like a Collison Adams rotation. I even throw Perk, but I think of them as bruisers that are trying to get Blake and DeAndre in foul trouble. And I think I've got those two slots. You obviously have to use Thabo a lot and Caron. I think Thabo and Caron have actually been effective in terms of that. That's rotation. But again, what I would try to do is try to make sure that I have Durant. I have to have Durant. I would like to have Durant, Ibaka, and Westbrook, two of them on the court at all times. That's really what I'd be going for.
And I'm looking at one, and it's funny. I'm looking at a popcorn machine that I just sent to Brian. And yeah, it looks like in one of the games against Memphis, they basically did that. Now, Westbrook did go off and have an amazing third quarter, but basically what you had either Reggie Jackson or Westbrook just playing very, very well.
Oh, by the way, maybe I asked Fisher to diagram some triangle plays from. Hey, Fish, you got some plays from Phil, and we can maybe get some real offense running in the fourth quarter. I'll get Fish to diagram some plays. He's not going in. He's like, no, just sit there, just diagram some plays out. We'll try some of the Phil stuff in the fourth quarter.
Are you allowed to do a sub in where Fish goes to the 3-point line, catches the ball and shoots it, and then just immediately gets subbed out? Because I'd be okay with a play like that.
I'm complaining about it, but I think Fish actually has a role in that kind of thing. Against the subs, you might stick him in for playing off the ball. But again, I would really. This is a really interesting team. Imagine if that team you could play triangle with those three guys. It's kind of built for that, and they're doing this silly stuff where they just roll the ball out, which is kind of annoying. I think the problem is and I was saying this, if I had to try against San Antonio, I'm trying. I think here's the thing. I don't think they don't have a realistic shot other than slowing it the hell down and trying to basically become the Grizzlies, grindhouse them, basically slow the game down as much as possible and try to beat them in the half court. And the problem with that is Westbrook is useless. The better lineup is almost without Westbrook, wow. You don't necessarily want to play Westbrook and Durant together. You want to run that Durant lineup, which was they played slower and they played the half court set. So Durant's better in the half court set without Westbrook, and then they kind of showed that. And then maybe kind of use Westbrook off the ball. The problem is if you have Westbrook in, I'm playing him at the 2. I can't have Thabo in, and I kind of want to have Thabo in to cover the Spurs guards. And not having, and then even in that situation, I'm kind of worried that Durant has to cover the 4 and the 5.
So by the way, just a random question. Did you anticipate that the Spurs in a conference finals game with more than 5 minutes left on the clock would be rolling out a lineup of Bellinelli, Dia, Mills, Banez, and Joseph?
Yeah, kind of. I think that I basically mentioned that Pops has like not cared. He's been rolling out regular season lineups, and that's his regular season lineup. He's like, oh, I'm ahead. He's gonna roll out like the guys he wants to get. Aaron Baines will be out there, and he's been doing that all playoffs. And I kind of say that in the preview. And I think if he's dominating them, and I think again without Ibaka, this is just a series of bad matchups. This is a series. Like by taking Ibaka away, you're making Scotty Brooks have to make adjustments on the fly. And he's not good at adjustments on the fly.
And Ibaka is really valuable. Just to you OKC people that seem to love Westbrook, Durant and Ibaka are the engine behind this team. Maybe Westbrook could be there, as Arturo's saying, if he was played right, if he was played as a 2 guard that wasn't given the ball. Because when you give Westbrook the ball to start the play, he takes 8 more shots than Durant.
Well, here's the thing. You can run an offense, and they used to run it the same offense they used to run for Harden. But again, I think the trick is you have to figure out how to – it's a dueling banjos and how to use things effectively. It's like Phil was the master of this, of like –
are you literally – and by the way, are you saying this? Because this is intriguing to me. You may have just made the metaphor that makes this click. If obviously not as many threes, but if you've got a Westbrook that's kind of being closer to Harden on offense and doing what Westbrook does on defense –
yeah,
that is exciting because Harden plays no beat.
This is what I've been telling you. Like this is what I say. Look, if you use them off the ball and you still have them on defense, it's great. And I think the thing is, it's like think about. And I was like going to make Phil was a master of this. Think if you guys and I watched those Lakers teams that beat my Celtics team in the finals, which is he was really good at having like sets where he would either have Odom out there or if not he's running the offense through Gasol and he would like rotate this out and keep the guys fresh. And it was always like there was a different set that was running kind of a version of that. And I think OKC has the horses for that, and they used to do it with Harden and switch up. And this is the thing that killed Oklahoma, like San Antonio. I mean, I don't think you could probably do it with this team, which is better than the team they beat in the 2011 Western Conference Finals, 2012 Western Conference Finals. But you could still do something like that where you're running the kind of the 2 offenses and the 2 sets and 2 lines. But again, I think the problem is like by not having again, I was telling this to somebody, which is. Honestly, the best possible result for the best possible game was probably game 1 because even in game 1, San Antonio scored all these points in the post, but like Westbrook and Durant were good. They were able to kind of keep it close. They just didn't have enough horses to keep up. And I think, and San Antonio wasn't hitting all their threes. And I think this game was just kind of, San Antonio has a different gear, and they put it in this game at the end of the first half. And they just took like a 15-point lead in like something like a couple minutes, and they're doing the same thing now, which is like they're just really really good. And at this point, I don't know how this team doesn't win the title because the other 3 teams aren't as good as them. They really aren't. And San Antonio really hasn't played at full speed in any of these games, which is just kind of ridiculous to think.
So by the way, just one last point, because I feel bad because this, on our script, we have this listing as San Antonio OKC. We've been talking mostly OKC. I've asked this to you like 4 more other times on the podcast, and I'm just not going to stop. I've got it listed in our notes as what the Tim Duncan. Like, this guy, I never cease to be amazed with
a couple things. Pop has taken care of him throughout his career. I think he's done a great job at changing his body type. If you look at the weight he's carrying now versus the weight he carried even like 3 years ago, he's gotten himself. He's thinner. He's more mobile. He's taking weight off, so he's not. I wouldn't be surprised if he's like Kareem, who used to do the yoga thing, where like he's taken weight off. He's made himself more flexible. He's been smart about taking care of himself. So that's actually kind of been good. And I think, again, the other thing is, like, there's a lot of players around him, so the load on him is less. I mean, I think you can't undervalue the fact that they've got Splitter and they've got Leonard and they've got all these shooters. And so, when you combine that all together, that's where it's come down. And here's the thing: even if Tim went down, this team would still I would still say, wow, I don't see how like the Spurs lose the title. And OKC wasn't that way. Like Ibaka went down, I was like, man, there's no way they can't do it. The matchups aren't there. It's the same thing if like LeBron went down. It's like no, the Heat would be done. And I think you talked
What
about
team in the East are the current Heat if you take off LeBron?
if what team in the East are the current Heat if you take off LeBron. God, they're like an older version of the Raptors. Like
Yikes.
they're like and kind of on the downside because Wade just doesn't have it anymore. And well, I mean, I don't know even the Raptors. I think the Raptors are, oh God, that's a tough question because I gotta think like dominant two guard and like a center who can score but is a little soft on the inside. That's a hard question. They're like they would remind me a little bit of those Hawks teams with like Horford and Johnson is what they would remind me of. They were okay but they weren't great. They're gonna be competitive but they weren't gonna be great. So 45 win team possibly, maybe 40 win team.
All right. So, by the way, one other question on San Antonio, because I mean, 2-game hole, even if the Spurs, as you point out, even if they get injured, one of their stars, Ibaka's down, and that, already puts, even with one of theirs, they're more adjusted to handle it. Their bench, right, is just freaking strong. It's not right.
Yeah, no, and I think
So,
the key difference between this series and like the 2011 series is like, you know, all the Spurs young guys like were very inexperienced in that 2012 series, and all the Spurs, everybody on the Spurs team has gone through a finals. Like I tweeted this out earlier. It's like Danny Green is not intimidated by a Western Conference Finals against Oklahoma City. Like he did this against the Heat in the finals in the big game. Hell, he could have won the Finals MVP. All these guys have been through the war. They know what they're doing. Like. And man, it's like people even make fun of people like they make fun of Boris Diaw, but Boris Diaw is a matchup nightmare in this series because once you take Ibaka out, that means like Kevin Durant has to cover Boris Diaw, and Boris Diaw can actually shoot, dribble, and post up, and he outweighs Durant by a good like 80 or 90 pounds. So
really,
he's a
that
night.
much?
I would, yeah, go if you look at the two of them next to each other, and he's that tall. It's not like Durant even has the height advantage. So and they've been doing this like when Oklahoma goes, oh, we're gonna go to guys challenge to dribble. It's like, oh, we've got the 7-footer that can dribble and pass the ball and shoot. Diallo is actually great, and they've got all these guys that are like they can shoot, they can move, they can play defense. It's a machine of basketball destruction. Pop really has done something, and I think. And somebody was asking me if does Tim Duncan retire if they win the title? I think he doesn't. I
That
think
was
they.
me on the last. That was me on the last podcast.
Yeah, I think they're going to. If they win, they're going to go and try to win the second one because they've never won two in a row. They'll go for one last ride, and I think it'll be really interesting because. I think they have the horses to do it. They're gonna have to pick out. They're gonna have to play Leonard, and I think people should get on this right now because if they sign him for something like $10 million, it's just gonna be a crime against people should not let him do this. And again, I still think that they're gonna steal somebody in the draft this year too. So,
Every year.
Yeah, but I think I think there's some really good steals in this draft. And if they manage to get one of them, it's gonna be kind of silly.
By the way, if you're talking coaches, I'm just looking at the game again. Derek Fisher is in. And by the way, this is a harken back to the very beginning of the show when we were talking the draft. As I pointed out, this is something interesting I find. Smooth Operator, I forget his real name on Twitter. He gives us a lot of guff over what we say. And what I find most interesting is his counterexample is often the Spurs. Your draft model lines up so ridiculously close to the Spurs, it's not even funny. Just when you're saying you think they'll get a steal in the draft, I'm saying I agree because you seem to have hidden cameras on the Spurs because the players you love are the players the Spurs always love.
Well, here's the thing. I suspect, and again, we have sometimes when you follow a certain method, you follow a scientific method, you come up with similar responses. And I think like by taking this and looking at this rationally, I've got a model that I'm assuming looks similar to what they have because I like, hey, I value that player, and oh, they've picked him up, or like they picked him up because they're undrafted. And as I said, there are some guys that like hit some boxes that are extremely interesting in this draft, and there's so much talent and so much like hype. There's some guys that are, I think there's some all-stars, like some real like game-changing dudes that are going to be
let's Dave. We were having a recent discussion with Dave Barry about the draft of all things. And one thing that he wants to point out is just the quantifying, just I'm sorry, I'm looking up like draft stuff, just quantifying, that there is rarity and there is always, surprise and shock and all this. So we should quantify that and say in any draft, right, there's a chance that these stars don't pan out. They're always Greg Owens. They're always Michael Beasley. So we think that there are players with lots of potential. There's no guarantee they'll become stars.
But here's the thing. I think we can build a decent model that gives us a 50% chance of 40 or 50% chance of getting it right, right? And when I say getting it right, getting a star, right? And so we talked about the Cavs, and they have 5 top 4 picks, 3 number 1s, 2 number 4s. So with those 5 picks, I would expect to draft at least 2 stars, 2 franchise-turning stars. And if you have 2 stars,
you win.
2 stars and average players, you can win the title. And in the East, 2 stars and average players, man, that makes you a conference finalist every year for the next 5 years, right? So it's kind of a failure to kind of get things together. What happened with this team? And so again, I mean, yeah, it's a game of chance, and you have to realize this. Like, look, it's a lottery, but it's the same thing as we were talking about. It's like playing blackjack or playing poker. If you follow a certain strategy and you have enough opportunities, right? So if you're flipping a coin 20 times, you have a reasonable expectation that you're going to get 10 heads, right? Or worse, you're going to get 8 heads if something weird's not happening. So, what you have to kind of stay in the game is what you have to do is you make yourself, you need to know when you have a losing hand. And I think that's the problem for NBA teams, that they don't know when they have a losing hand and they overvalue what you have. And if you have a team that won 35 games, right, then there's nobody in that roster that's really that great, and there's a good chance that, like, unless you have somebody who has historic numbers,
or even better, to your point, it's like the Wolves situation where you have a lot of bad players, and that means you have to jettison a lot of that roster. So best case scenario, no one on that roster is good, and you can jettison all of them, or some players on that roster are just downright terrible, and it should be your first priority to get rid of them.
Something I greatly admired was the fact that, like, Houston called up a D-leaguer in the first round playoff series, Troy Daniels, and he was great. They called him up, and he actually saved the game for them, and he was great. He was hitting all these 3-pointers, and then they were like, screw it, this isn't working. Let's get another guy. And you have to be willing to kind of walk away when you like, oh, this is a bad hand, it's a bad roster, let's get rid of him, right? And like we can't find. It's like, no, I mean, if you have a bad team or a bad roster, you can go out and get guys who are better. Like if you're the Lakers, for example, you can go out and get better guys than the guys who were currently on the Lakers rosters last year. You can. You totally can.
I would say just keep, Hill and Marshall, and everybody else goes. By the way, before we started this, said I wanted to keep this about 45 minutes. I think I actually got the clock wrong. I've been off by about 10 minutes. So we're going to be a little over, but that's all right. Don't worry. There's a few great topics that we might want more to discuss next week. There's, for those of you that like the wrestling talk I did, there's a fun comparison between that and
yeah, I was saying that we're gonna give OKC the Dusty, for any wrestling fans. We're gonna give OKC the Dusty Rhodes Hard Times promo, because my God, is San Antonio putting some hard times on the Thunder. Hard times, brother. Hard times.
Well, that wasn't the comparison, but yeah, definitely some comparisons between NBA television viewing and WWE. Definitely going to look more at the draft, because obviously things are set in stone and there are some interesting things to talk. As always, Arturo, I'm just going to end the show with, I'm going to give you a shot to give a shout out to some people, whoever you want. Obviously, keep it small. I'll give my shout outs, and then we'll bid adieu to our friends.
I think I'm going to do Spurs fans again. Sean the Flesh. He's a guy I follow. EJ Fisher, another guy I follow, who's really good, and I've given him shout outs before. I'm giving to him. Shamus Young is a OKC fan I follow. Born Clutch is a Heat fan I follow. All good, like all nice, and guys, you see them. If I retweet them, it's because I think they're funny, and I think they do. Rafael Montalvo is a guy I retweet a lot. Doesn't have a lot of followers. He's a Spurs fan, but he says funny things, so I retweet him. So he should have more than 93 followers.
If you notice too, those 93 followers. I think we're thinking of the same person. If I'm wrong, I apologize.
Yeah, the guy who has the
he's got like 93 followers, and they're all like big names. That's what shocks me. I'm like, the only people following this person are every person I respect on Twitter, it seems like.
Yeah, and there's guys like that who are funny, and like it's good to like And again, I'm trying to give a lot of like fans and guys who are like, what is it? Anybody who's not following Ian Levy should be. He's been writing some really great stuff for 538. So maybe I don't need to give him promo. He's going to go big time soon. And anybody who's not following Dave Barry should be following Dave Barry. What are you doing listening to us and not following Dave Barry?
Exactly, and that's at Wages of Wins. So, by the way, I get to steal. I was expecting this to be one of your shout-outs, but I'm going to steal it. Matty Iglesias gave you pretty prominent props in a recent piece he wrote about the draft lottery being just very exploitative, which is something we've talked about a lot. So, kudos to you. He basically said, hey, guess what? This 538 piece you enjoyed, Arturo's been doing this kind of work for years because Arturo, same wavelength as Nate Silver, just got there first.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's somebody, and I'm gonna forget your name, but somebody gave us a great shout. Luke O'Brien. He's another guy who he gave us a nice question. He said basically he was saying that the not only are the owners screwing the players, but the players are screwing the players because the vets are screwing the rookies because by having the rookie pay scale and by having the age limit, it means the vets get a bigger share of the pie because the money's kind of limited. And really, the owners are paying a fixed amount. They don't really care who it goes to. By having the draft, the rookie salaries, and the age limit, it means the vets get a bigger share of the money. So yes, it's a circle of life. The players screw the veterans screw the rookies, and the college players. Circle of life.
And the second shout out I'm going to give, this is always interesting, but you know what? I don't mind dissenters. Richard Drake, you were polite. You had some good comments. It's your Twitter handle is on2o, which is interesting, but was arguing about not Westbrook, sorry, John Wall being a decent first round pick and being a decent max contract player. So fun discussion there. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's a funny. If you go back, there's the piece I wrote that got the shout out from or got the link from the Wizards owner. I actually, when I wrote the follow up, I said, "Here's the thing. I think John Wall will has a shot at being an average player at the end of his rookie contract, which is kind of what happened." And I said, "Look, this is not what you want." I remember, I think I said draft Boogie, and I honestly, looking back, I would still draft Boogie over Wall, and because whatever Boogie might be crazy, but Boogie could be your franchise changing big at some point, and he's got the skill levels he can ever put it all together. He's been decent,
yeah.
and he has stretches.
He's again an interesting one. Sorry to get us off track with this one. We've talked with a guy named Eric Weiss who does interesting stuff about profiles and stuff. And I would be really interested in seeing, if Boogie had gone into slightly better systems. And even the Kings, I feel, are a little chaotic.
And I know some people who work for the Kings. You met some of those people, and what they say is that Boogie is a really competitive cat who really he's a bit like Kevin Garnett, and he got frustrated because he was playing on the system that made no sense, and so considering the kind of things that Sacramento is going to, make some sense. And he's been getting better. I think, again, he's a cat that if you put him on the right team, he's or like in the right system, and I think Sacramento's getting there, he's going to be really good. So and again, big men, you big men kind of take a while to mature, and we got the Siwo example. So he's the kind of he's got the flashes, he's got the skills. The scout loves him. I think he'll put it all together. But enough Boogie love. So anything else?
I was going to say the Zebo one is an outlier, and I guess you have come up with a system that will make me actually side with DeMarcus Cousins. Yeah, I'd have picked him over John Wall. So I'm actually going to end us off with a quote from Dave Barry. Dave just pinged me. He said, "Westbrook is the king of creating bad shots tonight." So that is a perfect line to end on. Thanks, Dave, and we'll see y'all next week.